You don't have to do everything all at once, but know that if every week you can add a little something new, you are adding years to your life and life to your years just by doing some simple things. And on top of that, you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of the people that you need to take care of. And you can't keep going if you don't take care of yourself.
Welcome back to Biohacking Autism. I'm Nadia, and today's episode is for every mom, every autism mom, every autism grandma, every caregiver who has been so focused on their child's health that they're completely forgotten about their own. If you're a woman in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or beyond, and you're running on caffeine, cortisol, and pure willpower, this conversation is going to change the way you think about your body. My guest today is Zora Benhamou. Zora is a gerontologist, a biohacker, and the host of Hack My Age podcast, where she covers menopause, hormones, longevity, and everything in between. She's interviewed over 300 women across 5 continents about their experience with aging and menopause. She has a master's in gerontology from USC, and she speaks 6 languages. She's lived in 8 countries, and she runs one of the most active private communities for women biohacking menopause. I've been a member of that community, learning from Zora for a while now. And when I invited her on the show to talk about caregiver health, she told me she was literally talking about caregiving that very same day. So it felt like a sign. Zora doesn't just talk about this stuff, she actually lives it. She's based in Europe, so she also brings an international perspective that I think is really valuable. Zora, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Nadia. That's a lovely introduction. And I'm excited to be here. And it's such an important topic that not enough people talk about. And I'm really honestly blown away by this podcast. It's so targeted and it's so niche and it is so necessary. And I bet anyone who's listening who is in the same position doesn't feel so alone anymore. And loneliness, and that's a whole other topic that can feel really heavy and cause some other issues with aging and longevity.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. So many angles to all of this. And we're going to cover a lot of them today. And I'm very excited about this. But to start, Zora, so you're a gerontologist, which most people or a lot of people have never, unfortunately, heard of. So can you explain what gerontology actually is and what pulled you into studying aging?
So yeah, nobody's alone here either. Most people do not know what a gerontologist is or what is gerontology. And people may think it's a geriatric physician. So I'm not a doctor. It's a doctor for older adults, but a gerontologist is somebody who studies aging and longevity. And we'd like to understand why people are aging, how they're aging, and how to slow it down. But we look at the whole life course from birth until death. So because that whole life course and your experiences through there can influence how you're aging. And so it's really important because gerontologists, we do focus on older adults and advocate for them, but we do need to look at the whole life course in order to interpret some of these things. So it's a fascinating topic. And I hope more people become gerontologists and are able to change the trajectory of their lifespan and their health span. So, and you can, absolutely. We just have to learn how.
I love that. Yeah, agreed. So in that field, you've interviewed over 300 women over 5 continents about menopause, and you guys should look at Zora's videos. They're amazing. I love those interviews. So what's the one thing that surprised you the most about how women experience this transition of menopause differently around the world?
So I've taken a menopause angle, and unfortunately, we don't study menopause in gerontology. Yep. Don't ask me why, but now it's changed. My old professor just told me, thanks to me, they've decided to put it on the curriculum because it is such a major transition in our lives. To me, it was absurd that we didn't cover this. So I decided to take this into my own hands and start deep diving into menopause. And what I do I'm a recovering nomad. So as I'm traveling around the world, I get a chance to stop women on the street and ask them 5 questions about menopause. And then I condense them into a 1-minute reel. I have longer versions on YouTube. I find it fascinating. It is incredible that the women will speak to a total stranger and have her film her and post it on social media. I do get a lot of rejection, by the way. So you don't see the behind the scenes. And I do speak to a lot more than 300 women because they do want to share their story. They just don't want to share it on camera. And the thing that surprised me, most are the attitudes, I think the cultural attitudes towards menopause. And it's not only cultural, but it's socioeconomic as well. So I noticed that actually in Asia, people are actually more open to speaking about menopause to a total stranger, which I thought they'd be more introverted. The most introverted people were in the Czech Republic, that in the farther I go into Eastern Europe, they became much more closed. And so that surprised me because I thought it kind of would be a bit the reverse. But the attitudes towards menopause in terms of socioeconomic level, I've noticed that when I speak to a woman who's on the street selling fruit in Vietnam, she's like, why are you even talking to me about this? I have so many other bigger problems. Like I need to feed my kids or my grandkids. And it's just, menopause was fine. It was okay. Whatever. It was painful, but I went through it. Just relax. The advice is usually just chill. It's going to be fine, which is hard to accept when you are actually experiencing every single symptom. And then when I go into a fancy mall and you have women who have more money, they're able, they have a different, they feel more empowered. Yes, I did talk to my doctor about menopause. They have access to a doctor or they're open to speaking to doctors. And that also was surprising that there is these different attitudes in terms of socioeconomic level. And then the other thing that surprised me recently, I just went to the Philippines and many women, whether you could afford it or not afford it or had access or not access, they were afraid of going to the doctor. I don't like doctors. I'm afraid of going to the doctor. So they don't go.
Really?
So that was that. There's a lot of surprises there. But that's when you watch those reels, you do get a sense for the different cultural attitudes and you can, you can draw some conclusions, but this is not official research. There's no randomized control trials. This is just all very observational.
Yeah. And it was actually very interesting. And it's very interesting that you're seeing these differences and then comparing them to here in the West, where frankly, it's not like we have completely honed down on it and worked on it. It's still something to be worked on, right? So it's interesting to see that the delta is maybe not that huge, that a lot of women here say, well, it's fine. I'll just power through it and then I'll be fine on the other side. So hopefully this will change things.
Once you've reached the other side, when I speak to a woman who's maybe in her 60s or 70s, they're actually quite excited for you because they're like, oh, I can't wait. It's so much better on the other side. It's fine. You're going to be, but if you speak to a woman who's literally going through it, you see if she's having symptoms, she's quite miserable because there's plenty of women who say, actually, I'm in my 40s or 50s and I don't feel anything yet. Like it's okay so far. So you do see, it does to me seem the interviews I take seem to correlate with the research in the terms of 25% of the women don't feel anything. Not that nothing's happening under the hood, but they're just kind of gliding through it. And then there's about 25-30% who really feel like every single symptom under the sun. And then there's everything in between, probably just another like 50% who are variations. Some are more intense, some less, some have some symptoms, but not all of them. Kind of coincides from what I'm seeing and what the research says.
Yeah. Well, and when you layer that with, what we're going to talk about, which, let's bring this home to our audience, because many of the women listening are caregivers who have completely put their own health in the back burner, right? No matter how they're going through their menopause. So in your community, you work with a lot of women in midlife. Many of them are caregivers, even if they're not caregivers for someone with autism, but they're caregivers for kids, for parents, etc. Yeah, some of them are, right, caregivers for aging parents, and some have children with disabilities. So in the autism world, we have moms and grandmas who have been in fight or flight mode for 10, 15, 20 years straight. So what patterns do you see when a woman like that finally starts looking at her own health?
Yeah, this is such a good, important topic. When you say caregivers, if anybody's heard of the sandwich generation, it means that you are sandwiched in between. You're around your 50s and you've got aging parents you have to deal with. And then you have possibly children, adult children or older children at home. And you have to, even though they're not babies anymore, you still have to take care of them. But when you have the layer of autism on top of it, it's more intensified. So it's a tough transition for many women, as is. But when you have the stress of caregiving, whether it's for aging parents or a child with a handicap, it makes this transition even harder. And so there's research showing that women, or actually caregivers in general, but most of the time it is a woman, they do have higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of chronic stress compared to parents who don't have these autistic child at home. So there's an interesting study recently, actually, just 2026, and they looked at 411 parents of autistic kids, and they saw that 20% of them had clinically significant anxiety and about 40% had clinically significant depressive symptoms. Okay, this is all compared to people don't. So you got more of this. And I mentioned to you before we started talking about Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn's work. She's a Nobel Prize winner, and she wrote the book called The Telomere Effect. And I read this book probably about 5 years ago. And I remember there was a chapter in the book talking about caregiving, and to give people sort of back up on what is a telomere. Telomere are the caps on the ends of a chromosome, and it protects your DNA. And we need to look at telomeres and DNA. We don't want any damage to the DNA. So these caps, they're like a shoelace, and they fray off as the cells divide. And then as we age, there's less and less of that protection. And that's when we get diseases and then eventually die. So we want to have longer telomeres. We want those caps to be strong. We want them to be there. We don't want them to shorten too fast. And I do remember that she said in this book, caregivers have the shortest telomeres. And that's faster cellular aging. Our cells are aging faster. Our bodies are aging faster. And they're measuring this because of the telomeres or telomerase activity. And so what she found also was that the longer that someone spent caregiving, the shorter their telomeres. So if you were to take anyone just in general, like an 80-year-old, well, their telomeres are going to be much shorter than a 30-year-old. And that's the thing. We don't want to accelerate this. We don't want accelerated aging. We don't want to happen too fast. But as a caregiver, it's happening faster than someone else. And so they also found that the telomere, like the shortening of it, was seen in the most stressed caregivers. And that was equivalent to about a decade of aging. So the more stressed you were, I mean, like imagine the most people who had the shortest telomeres or the fastest, aging, it was about a decade. So imagine if you're a woman right now listening and you're 45 years old. Well, no, you're actually like 55. If you're 55, you're actually could be like 65, depending how stressed you are. And women and mothers tend to have more of this stress than their partners or the male partnership. So when we talk about stress, I also there was something interesting about aging and telomeres and the studies that were done that were talked about by, I don't know if you've heard of Kelly McGonigal. She did a great TED talk on stress called Make Stress Your Friend. It's so brilliant. I saw this again years ago and I always remember it. And she pulled out a study from the University of Wisconsin, and they were about 30,000 Americans, and they looked at them over 8 years, and they found out that the people with high stress levels, like more than average, had a 43% increase of death, but only if they believed that stress was bad, like it harms their health. And then, and so that's when she brings out the perception of stress is much more important than the actual stress. And this is something we learn in gerontology as well. It's again, stress is there. It's going to be there. People listening, you will have stress to the rest of your life. It's not the stress that's bad. It's how you react to it and how you perceive it. And so in that study, they also saw that those who had lots of stress, but thought about it like, they thought, okay, it's neutral, or they looked at it even positively, like it's a challenge. they had the lowest mortality risk out of all the people, even the ones who said, oh, I have low stress. So that just blew my mind. And that just confirms that we need to manage our stress. The stress isn't going away. How do you look at the stress? And of course, it's so much harder for people who are emotionally attached and they're caregiving and whether it's their parents or their children, it's really, really hard than rather than your job or, okay, I just give my job or I change my job. You have to be with this person for the rest of your life. So it is much more intense, maybe harder to work at, but I think it's something to look at. And then when we think about the menopause transition, menopause, it's a stressor as it is. Like our bodies are changing, we don't know what to do. But when you have to take care of somebody as you are, menopause is exacerbated. So that stress those feelings, or maybe the hot flashes that you feel, Nadia, will be more intense or more frequent than mine because of that lived experience. And that's just your menopause. So this is where we really want to say, what can I do to help this transition? It's worth it because it's not only going to help me stay calm and relax and manage the household, but also it's going to help you live longer, better as well. So it's not just about tomorrow. A gerontologist always thinks about your future self and your 80-year-old self, but it is really important what we do today in order to protect that. And anybody's listening who cares about caring for that person for the rest of your life, well, then you better live as long as you possibly can in a good condition so that you can take care of that person.
That's exactly
it. A bit long-winded.
And the good news is
Does that make sense?
Exactly what. Yeah, that's the whole point. And the good news that everything you just said, I mean, what I heard is, frankly, it's still there. It's like 10 years. An additional 10 years. Oh my God. An additional 10 years for caring for someone with autism is huge. That's 10 more years of them having you by their side. And it's amazing. And a symptom like a hot flash, fine, you can be brave and live through it. That's not even the issue. The issue is that that's your body going, hey, there's an issue here. Can we take care of it? Right. And there are solutions. So there are solutions. And there are ways to make sure to either extend your life or at least not shorten your life. So this is not a luxury. The solution is there. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's do it. There's so much hope. Mm-hmm. So much.
So I mentioned to you early before we started recording, I was listening to your episode about anxiety and children with autism and how they're adult kids or smaller kids, whatever they are, they feel you. They feel your energy. They feel if you're stressed, if you're depressed, if you have anxiety. And we know as we're going through this menopause transition, when we lose our progesterone, it's one of our menopause hormones or our sex hormones, when that goes, and it will go no matter how healthy you are, that's when we start to have trouble sleeping. That's when we have more anxiety. That's when we can have menopause depression, all these things. So it's not only the stress that you're dealing with, but you have this added layer. But if we were to bring back progesterone, that is very likely going to help you get through this. If you can feel more calm, and this is what you said in your episode too, is that will transmit through the whole household, because without that progesterone, with this hormone fluctuations or when they're gone completely, it's really, really hard. And if you're so anxious and you may go, I don't even know why I'm anxious. I was calm and I was okay for the first 10 years of my child's life, but now I just can't handle it anymore. And that can be very much due to the loss of the hormones. So we want to do what we can to stay calm, to stay relaxed, and have that energy around the house that child can feel to be relaxed, because that child will obviously be very disturbed if you're stressed, and then you have another problem to deal with.
Exactly. And they can feel it. It's like electricity. Frankly, before I started all of this, progesterone and all the longevity stuff, I had to tell myself, you're a robot. You are a robot. You're a robot. And that was the only way I could bring like all those internal feelings down so he wouldn't feel it, because otherwise he was getting electrocuted by my stress. So again, essential and so much easier to take a capsule than to be a robot.
Or a cream or a patch or cream, whatever. Exactly. There's so many solutions. There's so many
Absolutely.
solutions, and it's just about
Absolutely.
finding the right doctor who can do it the right way for you, because we know there's not a one size fits all when it comes to hormones. They're very powerful. I call estrogen a longevity hormone. It is so amazing when it's done correctly, and you find your right dose. It can be life changing, because the last thing you need to worry about is all these menopause symptoms. And by the way, there are 103 of them. It's not just like 4 or 5 that maybe people think about. So
Right.
it is a big deal. So please learn more about menopause and what you can do about it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit more about it to make it a little bit clearer to everybody. And you guys don't get overwhelmed. Some of this will get a little bit technical, but there are solutions. So hang in there with us. We're going to go through all of this. So let's talk about what's actually happening in a woman's body during perimenopause and menopause, because a lot of our listeners are living with symptoms. They've just, like we said, accepted as normal aging. So can you walk us through the hormones that matter the most during this transition? What happens to when each one starts to decline? We talked about estrogen, progesterone, but how about testosterone? And how about the thyroid, right? What does each one do, and what does it feel like when it drops?
Good question. So I just released a podcast, my last one, like Menopause 101, and it keeps it really simple, because it's made for people who literally just learning about this, and it gets overwhelming. I remember when I was first learning about it, I was just progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, estradiol, estriol, like, what is this? So hang in there. Like, that when you hear these words over and over again, you will get it. But I think it's worth learning them, because these are parts of your body, and you will once you understand how it works and find these solutions, you'll be so much happier. So starting off with, to understand what is a hormone. A hormone is a signal that it's a little thing that in your body, it runs around your bloodstream, and it's like a text message, and it has to send a signal to the cell. And when you have receptors all over your body and all these different tissues and organs and cells. Even mitochondria has estrogen receptors. And these receptors are like these little, let's call them like a satellite receptor. Like, it wants to receive the signal. So it's looking for an estrogen or a progesterone or some hormones to receive it, and then get the instructions what it needs to do. So it's like little text messages. Okay, what do I do? And then when you lose your hormones, and eventually we will lose them, these receptors are what's going on, and they try to find the hormones, and it's not able to get it. So hormones are just like signaling molecules. And when we go through our mid-30s, more or less, that's when we start to lose progesterone. So the two hormones that you'll hear a lot are estrogen and progesterone. They usually go together. They're like a balance, and we want them to be in balance. And when progesterone starts to decline before the estrogen, that's when we start to feel a little bit more moody, more anxious. We have more sleep trouble. You'll notice something's a little off. And in your 30s, you are certainly not thinking about menopause. But nowadays, we know there's this word called perimenopause, which is the time before menopause. Well, peri means around, but honestly, it's between 5 and 10 years before your actual birth date, which is 12 consecutive months without a period. And officially, you're in menopause. And then after that, it's called postmenopause. But we have perimenopause, and that's when the hormones start to decline, and then they start to go up and down, because your body's trying to get these signals to make more estrogen or make more hormones, and your body's not responding to it. And so this is where we want to be aware that you have this progesterone decline, because you may go to a doctor feeling a little weepy, like, I don't know, I'm crying for no reason, or I'm anxious and I was never anxious before. And your doctor will give you an antidepressant or a sleep medication. And maybe you need that, maybe you don't, but usually it's not the first line of protocol that I think should be done. It should be like, let's look at your hormones. So if it's just your hormones, a little progesterone cream on your arm is like kind of the simple thing that people do in the early perimenopause stage, because we have early, mid, and late. And then after that, and progesterone actually takes quite a steep decline, and it goes pretty fast relative to estrogen. That can goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and eventually declines. And that's a little bit, it's, even though you may feel like you're falling off a cliff in menopause, it's still a more gradual decline than progesterone. And I'm really speaking generally. Everyone has slightly different experiences. But estrogen And so when estrogen and progesterone are not in balance, we also can have these menopausal symptoms. And estrogen is there's one day it goes up, one day it goes down. And that's when you may start feeling a hot flash. You may get some weight gain. You may find it harder to build muscle. So many symptoms are related to estrogen. And then that's also when you have the silent killers happening underneath the hood in terms of osteoporosis, low bone mineral density, heart starts to build up with plaque when you lose this, because estrogen is quite a protective hormone, and it helps your arteries be flexible. It helps with the plaque buildup. It helps with so many things. It helps your joints. It's like hydration for your skin, and it helps bring fluid into the joints. I could go on and on forever, but I don't want to overwhelm you. But generally, we need our estrogen, we need our progesterone, and they will eventually go. So we want to try to, there's many determinants of when you go into menopause, but there's 12 factors that I often talk about. But menopause is mostly genetic. So if you ask your mother when she went through menopause, you'll probably fall around that date more or less. But you can't push it. You can't delay it a little bit. And now there's research showing that we can actually reverse it, which I never said and I never talked about, but it's emerging research. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I guess we could maybe reverse this. So, but generally now I'm pretty confident to say we can delay it. But these are the hormones that we mostly look at when you're in that early perimenopause stage. But I also want women to be aware of testosterone. Eventually, many women can actually go through menopause with quite high or robust or good levels of testosterone. It doesn't seem to be as dramatic as estrogen and progesterone. It'll eventually go, but it's easy to test and it's easy to see where you're at, and you can top that up. And with low testosterone, that's when we often find low libido. You just feel like having sex anymore. And my goodness, with all the stress that happens in life, we need a little bit more as help as we possibly can to keep intimacy in our lives if that's important to you. But it's also good for motivation, and it has so many other functions that we won't even get into today. But that's the third hormone. The three sex hormones that are often talked about in menopause is progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. But as you're feeling some of these symptoms, if you're feeling your hair is going away, or it's fall out in clumps, or it's getting thinner, or you're gaining weight, you're tired all the time, it may not be your hormones. Your sex hormones. It may not be aging. It may be your thyroid. And this is another rabbit hole to go down. And you need a doctor who's going to test you with the right tests. And I think you've had Dr. Amy Horniman on, is talking in great detail about the tests that you need to do, because you just get usually one test, which is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And then if it's okay, if within the range, which is a big range on normal labs, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to give you the full picture. So if you suspect thyroid, then you really want to learn more about it and take a deeper dive into that. And I would also test your insulin, your fasting blood glucose, because maybe you're gaining weight because you're becoming more insulin resistant, which tends to happen very frequently in menopause. And on top of that, I also like people to look at their heart health. I talk a lot about heart health and bone health, because you don't feel your bones getting brittle. You don't feel your heart getting full of plaque until it's too late. You have a fracture, or you have a heart attack or a stroke. And so this is, and the stress, even with a great diet and a great exercise program, if you have stress, you still build up plaque in your arteries. And that's a big driver for cardiovascular disease. So I think it's something worth looking at, and like your blood pressure. And there's so many things to look at, but without overwhelming you, these are the major things. I would say you have an opportunity to take a look at it and then course correct so that you can be living longer, better, and in a good condition in order to take care of your children. Because if that's the game, it's not a luxury. It's really mandatory that you do this if you care about your family.
It's mandatory.
Is that too much?
And it's
overwhelming?
No, not at all. I think, first of all, yes, you're right. You know what? It's mandatory. It's not a luxury. It's not selfish. But also, it's so feasible because the tests are very feasible everywhere in the world. These are not like very complicated longevity tests. These are all feasible. And then the solutions also are very feasible. So why not do it? And I think most people don't do it just because maybe they don't know about it, which again is the goal of what we're doing here, to educate you guys about this list of tests. Walk into your doctor's office with all this list, and I'll put your episode in the show notes, the Menopause 101, because I think it's amazing. Once you are educated, you can walk in there and say, no, I'm not going to just test my estrogen. I want to test all of these, and I want to test my testosterone, and I want to test not just my TSH, but reverse T3, antibodies to the thyroid. I want to test all of this. And then if we find anything, even if it's normal, but if it's close to the wrong range, then let's do something about it for prevention, maybe.
Yeah. I have a lab test guide, just a little PDF that I can share with all the tests that I think women in midlife should eventually get. Not that you have to do them all the time. And it's broken up into heart or hormones, bones, like whatever it is that's interesting you. Then you just kind of throw those at your doctor and say, can we get some of these tests done? But there are solutions. There are so many solutions. And I have to say many, they're accessible. Most of them are free. The only thing is that it's hard sometimes to carve out a moment for yourself to take a minute or two to breathe, right? Or to practice a little stretching or yoga or cook yourself a decent meal. It's stressful in that sense. But I think once you practice a little bit, you take things step by step. You don't have to do everything all at once, but know that every week you can add a little something new. You are adding years to your life and life to your years just by doing some simple things. And on top of that, you're taking care of yourself so that you can take care of the people that you need to take care of. And you can't keep going if you don't take care of yourself. And it's okay if you have no one to care for. Like that's your life, but you don't have that option anymore. So you really have to make sure the body is functioning well and in order to have harmony around for everybody. If that's important to you, again, you do you, but that's my advice.
Of course. And it's a vicious cycle, honestly. So even if you don't think it's important to you, it's what I call the pay now, pay later syndrome, right? So if you don't take care of it now, it will come back much bigger, later. So 100%. And a lot of our audience, by the way, is also international. So, and I know in your group, we talk a lot about testing and finding doctors, locally and international, like in Europe. So I think testing is pretty similar when it comes to sex hormones, thyroid, heart.
They're similar.
Well, right?
All the basic stuff is the same. Maybe they'll have different measurements, nanograms per ml or picograms per ml. So they'll give you ranges, and you'll see if you're in the range or not in the range. But we have AI now that we can cross-check we can interpret things. Not that replaces a doctor, but if you just want some quick data, and this is what I do, I'll run my information and then I'll talk to a doctor. Say, this is correct what I'm reading on what ChatGPT has given me? And I would say most of the time it is pretty accurate for me and in my own experience, but I also am health literate and I can know when there's something off. So it's not for somebody who's just kind of new to this thing, but you do have that, and you do have ChatGPT or AI, whatever tool you use, to find a menopause doctor and say, look, I'm really looking for somebody who understands bioidentical hormones. Let's say I live in this region. Do you find it? Scroll through Reddit or any kind of review sites. And if anybody has good things to say about certain doctors, like you can filter these things out to try to find a doctor who really understands menopause, because that's hard. But we can use these tools to get there. And if not, you just talk to me and I'll find it for you.
Yeah,
find
exactly.
someone.
Absolutely. And the better the doctor is, the less you guys have to do. So there you go. Maybe a little incentive there. But that makes me think of a different type of testing that could be actually really good and bridge a little bit that gap. And that's what do you think of the at-home testing options, or even the at home, testing things like the strips that measure estrogen, progesterone, or even, the other at home testing where you can have a little vial.
Yeah, there are many different kits out there. The trouble is, how do you interpret them? Because if you don't know anything, you don't know what the ranges should be, you'll get a little lost. Some of the sites are actually good in giving you some kind of ranges. And I actually use a website called Self Decode. And it's just where I put all my labs. And I can see over the course of 6 years, like my estrogen going up and down and then down. And then if I use something new, and then they give you the optimal ranges, which I really like. And then some recommendations. And there's so many websites out there like that. You can use some of these tools that are more advanced than just say ChatGPT. Like these are medical websites. Mm-hmm. So I would say the at home, it depends what you're testing. So the big hurdle is, how do you interpret it? The second one is, I find they're pretty useful. You don't have to go to a doctor's office. They're not very expensive. And so far in the UK and the US, it's quite accessible to get these. In Europe, so my experience so far, at least in Spain and Portugal, have been that I can walk into a lab, get whatever I want. I just did it in Thailand, and they don't need a prescription, but I kind of know what I'm doing. I kind of go in there, I want this and this and this, and no problem, as long as you pay. And in Portugal, it's not that expensive. It's not, the US, I think is much more expensive, but we can do these things. Actually, it's not difficult. I know it's much harder in the northern countries, in Denmark and in Sweden. It's not as accessible. However, I'm now learning that, and I have to test this out, that there are websites popping up throughout Europe, and I bet the US has probably a similar one, where you can pay a doctor for 15, 20-minute session. And you can say, like, I've got hot flashes, I don't know what to do. And it's cheap. If here in Europe, it's about 30 euros, which would be maybe $40 for a doctor visit. In Portugal, even cheaper. And they would ask you some questions, and then they would send you a prescription. And you go to the pharmacy and you say, okay, I'm going to get started with this. Now, I haven't tested this out. I've just know other people who have, and they've been successful with it and they're happy with it. So if you really can't find a doctor, you're really struggling. I don't know how well versed these doctors are in menopause, but you can ask, they'll say, what's your problem? I have a bone, or I have a rash, or I have menopause. And they would likely send you to somebody who knows something about menopause and hormones, but at least you could get some relief right here, right now. I guess the MIDI health and some of the menopause things of the US have that. Yeah. And now Europe is popping up with those things too.
Exactly. And it's just a balancing act, right? So if you have something that's very available and easy to access, well, you're going to balance it by being more educated, frankly. So it's very easy, very accessible. But when you walk in, you need to know exactly what you want and really to be able to advocate for yourself. But otherwise, it's there.
Well, when you go to these types of menopause specialty sites like Alloy or MIDI, they specialize in menopause, which is great. And these doctors say, we don't go by labs, we go by your symptoms. And so you can get relief. There's problems with that too, but I think at least you can go and get relief right now, and they deliver it to your door. And it's done. Sometimes you go to, it depends on the website, but I know some of them deliver you to your house. And so then you have options to ask questions, and like, this is working, this is not working. And that's wonderful. I still think that once we get on the hormones, it's always good I always like to test and say, okay, even if I'm feeling good, I want to test. If I'm not feeling good, I'm like, it's not working, I suspect that this is not absorbing, then I test and I confirm that. You don't have to do this, but I do really, I'm in that world of testing, measuring, and assessing. I like to know and the more I test, the more I know my body, and it confirms sometimes my intuitions.
Yeah. And if you can, why not? I mean, again, it's just metrics. It's a way to know if you're going in the right direction. And so now we have our audience, they've tested, they found their doctor. And then what comes next is what you're a strong advocate for, which is hormone replacement therapy, HRT. So for the autism mom who's listening, who's been told by her doctor that HRT is dangerous or that labs are normal, what do you want them to know?
It is BS. That is going on, old research that has since been debunked. And these doctors, and I was one of those people who believed it too. We all believed it. And this was in the early 2000s. There was a big study called the Women's Health Initiative. And this is where they started a study with women on estrogen. And these are all synthetics. It's not kind of the stuff when we don't do these. Hopefully we're not doing this stuff now. Most doctors are now prescribing bioidentical. So there's newer hormones on the market. But back then we used these synthetic ones called conjugated equine estrogen. And then we had a synthetic progesterone. It wasn't progesterone. It was like a synthetic one. And so then they had an arm with just estrogen only. And so what they found out, well, some women started to develop breast cancer. So they just halted the study without even analyzing it. And then the word got out that estrogen causes cancer, and this made headlines. The original researchers of the study came back and said, no, we didn't say that. And actually, we found that there was a decrease in breast cancer risk for the people who were on the estrogen. And so it was the progestin, the synthetic progestin, that was causing a little bit of havoc. And in fact, it was a slight increase. It's not even like dramatic increases, because these women, there were a lot of holes in this study. And there were women who were much older. They didn't have hot flashes. They couldn't have hot flashes to be there. They were metabolically in a terrible condition, and there was many problems. So we can't really compare that study to what we're doing today. And doctors, unfortunately, are still going with what they've heard without actually reading the whole study, which is, to me, malpractice. Like, you have to help this woman. So overnight, then when the headlines came, women were off. They threw their hormones down the toilet, and there was it, because we were all scared. And unfortunately, 2 decades of women have not had any help getting through this transition, and just told to white knuckle their way through it. And so this is where there's so much research now that you can go online and get it. You can get it interpreted. You can ask AI, what does this study mean? And it'll explain it to you. And so the hormones that we're using today are actually much safer, much better, and work better. And I think that we have to dig a little deeper and pressure the doctor. If your doctor actually, I wouldn't pressure the doctor, to be honest. If your doctor doesn't know, I would go find another doctor, because you're not going to change that doctor's mind. And I really wouldn't want a doctor who doesn't really know what they're doing to start working with hormones with me. It's probably not a good thing, because it's not a one size fits all. And that's why we try to go find somebody who's at least has some experience with women in menopause, and ask them for the bioidentical hormones if you can. And I still think any hormones are better than no hormones, even the synthetic stuff, because it works. And we're not, if we've been on birth control at any point in our life, there's those levels of estrogen are so much higher than a menopausal hormone therapy, that if the doctor was able to prescribe that, and you were taking it, there should be no question about menopausal hormone therapy. So what we're finding out now through new research, and it's still not enough research, we're just getting through it. It's all quite positive in terms of helping the brain, the heart, the vagina, the skin, practically every organ on our body has a receptor for estrogen. And we're finding some really good data. And even now, as much as doctors can argue about hormones, good, bad, or how to do it, they all agree, at least the FDA has approved estrogen for prevention of osteoporosis. And prevention of osteoporosis. If you have a family history, your mother fractured her bones, or grandma had osteoporosis, you may want to really look into hormones, because they help so much with your bone density and building stronger bones. And bones is like a whole other topic. And you'd be like, well, I don't care. What about my bones? Well, you don't care about your bones until you fracture them when you're 60s and 70s and can't get out of bed, and then don't have a normal quality of life back again. And you cannot take care of your family. So you don't have an option either to break a bone. And bone is such a slow process to grow it or to break it down. It's constantly growing and breaking down, but we break down more bone as we don't have estrogen. But when you bring it back up, it does increase the bone density, but it's again, so slow growing. We don't want to wait until something happens. So please go check your bones, make sure you prioritize that as well, just as much as your muscles and any other part of your body. But certainly hormone therapy is a great option for stronger bones.
Yeah. Talk about prevention. I mean, all these things are so preventable and so feasible. And again, part of the reason I wanted to do this is for people to get educated. So when you walk into that doctor's office, you have to take charge of your health. And if a doctor, like Zora says it will cause cancer, and you've listened to this and you know that it's not true, well, you could just leave that doctor's office or find someone else, learn a little bit more about it. If you're not sure, you can definitely do that. That's very accessible to you. I mean, we're telling you, we're both on HRT. It's absolutely amazing. If you're not sure, read more about it. We'll put some info in the show notes, but there are amazing solutions.
There's some truth what the doctor is saying. So I don't want to, if the doctor says no hormones cause cancer, hormones are bad for you, it's going to give you a heart attack or stroke. What they're looking at is let's say the synthetic estrogen, the conjugated equine estrogen. This is an oral estrogen. And I don't like to poo-poo things or saying if you need it, you need it. But that's been shown to increase the risk of heart attack and stroke. So that is probably not a good option. So your doctor would be like, oh no, your dad had heart attack, we shouldn't go there. But there are other options. We know that the transdermals, which is a cream, a patch, a gel, these things do not increase your risk of having a heart attack or stroke. So that's your doctor may only look at that. They only may know about oral estrogen. They don't know anything about the transdermal. So what they're saying is true, but it's not the full picture. And then the same thing, I just had a doctor visit here in Portugal, and the doctor looked at my hormone cream and she said, why are you taking estrogen? It causes cancer. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why are you still like the medieval ages? And what she was referring to was that if you take estrogen and you still have a uterus and the uterine lining grows, that's a breeding ground for cancer. It increases your risk for cancer. But that's why we take progesterone to make the uterine lining thinner. If you don't have a uterus, then you don't have to worry about that problem. So they're going on this sort of half truths. So they're not completely wrong, but they're really not looking at the full picture. And that's why going to a hormone doctor or a menopause doctor, it helps a lot because they understand all these nuances.
Yeah. And again, educating yourself, because it's not a black box. It's not one input and then one output. It's a whole system, which actually brings me to another thing that a lot of doctors resist, and that's testosterone for women, because testosterone should be only for men. And even here in the US, by the way, it's not very easy to get it prescribed. Of course, I'm on testosterone. I think it's absolutely
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Of course. And we have testosterone as women. We have testosterone. All women have testosterone. Yeah. Men have estrogen and progesterone too. But you and the experts on your show talk about it all the time, openly. So what does and you talked about it a little bit, but what does testosterone do for a woman in midlife? And why are there so few people offering it? And how can a woman, what are the different forms of testosterone that she can use?
So testosterone is something I think is really good to measure, because if you're not low on it and you don't have the symptoms, then I would say, okay, maybe you don't need it for now. But testosterone is like you said, it's called a male hormone because they have more of it. And estrogen is called a female hormone because we have more than the men, but they have the estrogen, like you said, and progesterone, and we have testosterone. And it does play a big role in our bodies. And it's not just libido. And unfortunately, doctors out there, they will only prescribe it to you if you complain of low libido, because our vaginas are the only important thing in the house. And I just don't understand, but it does so much more than that. And what we have reported through, not only there is some research showing that it helps with muscle, although there's other research also showing that estrogen is a big driver of muscle as well. It helps with the motivation, and they're doctors, and they're even testosterone researchers who will argue that to death and say, nope, it's only for libido. I have to beg differently because I think I've seen enough in our community of women reporting these other effects that it helps them. Now, testosterone is a hormone that unfortunately in the US and in Europe, we don't have a female dosage. We don't have a female form. So what doctors will do off label, they will give a man's prescription and the man's dosage, but we have to take 1/10 of it. Or so you just squeeze out a teeny tiny bit and you're never really sure, is that enough or not. In Australia, they do have a female testosterone. I think in New Zealand, they may have also. So it is existing. And then there are people out there who are fighting to get a female hormone for testosterone out. And also the FDA says this is it's like a narcotic. Like if you are in sports or athletics, you're not allowed to take this because it may enhance your performance. What? You may actually run faster. Yeah. And do better. But yet it's only prescribed for libido. I don't get it. So they're trying to remove that label. And that came from the situation that happened in the Olympics like decades ago. Right. So it's old news and it's got to be turned around, and women are begging for this. And there is research showing high dosages of testosterone for cancer patients, which I have yet to do a podcast episode on this, but Karen Martell's done it and I've listened to it. It just blew my mind how some people are treating this with pellets, and pellets is a form of embedding a hormone into your skin. And we generally don't like to start off there because you may get a high dosage and you can't take this out for 3 months. And or low dosage or whatever it is, you're not feeling good and you got to not feel good for 3 months. It's not a great place to start, but for the therapies, it's incredible. They're using this. So there is some research showing that. Now, again, is it robust? Is it great research? I don't know, but we're so far behind in the research. We still have a lot to catch up to, but I do believe if we have it in our body and we're producing it and we're losing it and we're feeling the side effects, then why not replenish it? It was our body was making it before. And the anecdotal evidence that we have, that we're hearing how it can be a life changer for some women. Like, why not? The game is to not overdose, because you will know if it's over. You'll get acne. You'll get hairs growing out of your face or out of other places. If you rub it on the back of your knee, my hair I had a patch of skin on the back of a patch of hair on the back of my knee. I was like, okay, I should probably rotate this. So yeah, you have some of these side effects. If you really overdose, probably if you're injecting like mega doses, then you can have clitoral engorgement and your voice may change and your hair may fall out. And some of these things are irreversible. So you don't want to overdo it. But when I speak to doctors who prescribe testosterone, they're like, we've never seen that. It exists, yes, but we never give that much to a patient. We haven't had any situation like that. So you'll know if it's a little too high, and then you can adjust. And the only thing is that what I've been saying, I take testosterone as a gel, and I call it my love cream or my sex cream or my sex gel. I hug my it's on. And I do find that I used to take compounded, but I find that the man's version works better for me. And gel is generally absorbed better than cream. Yeah. Compounded, there's doctors who don't like compounded because you're never sure exactly what you're getting. But I'm like, well, if you test and you don't feel anything and the tests show it's low, yeah, that compounding farm is not good. Go find another one. Not that they're all bad, but that's sort of the problem. But I know the girls who go high, and you've seen this in our community too. They're like, wow, this is what it's like to feel like a man. Like this feels great. However, there's consequences sometimes for that, and they don't like the side effects, and there's a trade-off. So we got to find the balance. Like, we can't be like man all the time, and maybe I don't think we should, but we want to find enough so we have our libido back. If we want to be intimate, this is a great solution. And there's some burgeoning research as well that it plays a role in bone as well, in bone building. So I think and I can see it. I can see how even indirectly can help with bone, because if you're building more muscle because you have more testosterone on board,
right.
then that's going to send the signal to the bone to grow more bones. So the more muscle you have, the better the bone is for the bone, et cetera, et cetera. So testosterone is good. Go, you can easily test your levels and then see it, play around with it. And obviously with your doctor's guidance, and see if it can be a game changer. And I have to tell you this. I did a reel actually on this woman I met, and she said she tried hormone therapy, didn't work for her because she just didn't get it right. She was actually not detoxifying it well, that she found eventually. But she said that the testosterone, however, was incredible. And she went to her doctor for the follow-up, and she said, I am feeling so good. She's like, the estrogen, progesterone not working, but that testosterone, oh my God, I feel so good. Life is good again. And the doctor said, you're on too high of a dosage. Without testing her, just by the fact that she was so happy, he said, or no, it was a female doctor. She said, nope, not renewing this for you. And I thought that was just cruel. So beware. Again, like you want to be enthusiastic, but not too enthusiastic to report back to your doctor. But it can be a game changer. And I think testosterone is really, we will see, I think we'll have a woman's formula, hopefully sooner than later. And then we'll learn more about it and how we can use it. And there's creams and gels and compounded and the man's versions, and there's troches and there's injectables, like just like any other hormones, we have loads of options.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, until it's available everywhere and very easy to prescribe, you guys, like Zora said, it's available. Take charge of your health. Just go slow, go very slow, and measure and see how you feel, and measure also, your hormones, and you'll be able to see what your max is and where you should be, but a quick note to everyone listening, just because we're talking about all of this and we're going to get into some specific maybe protocols, supplements, and tools. Nothing we discussed today is medical advice. Zora and I are sharing what we've learned and what has worked for us and the communities we're part of. So always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to your health regimen, especially around hormones. Okay, so now we can just keep going. And so hormones, you said, are the foundation. Great. But you always say they're not the whole picture. And so let's talk about the pillars that sit on top of that foundation. And we can start with sleep, because sleep is destroyed during menopause. 40 to 60% of women in perimenopause have sleep issues, and it can last 7 to 10 years. Crazy.
Now, layer on top of
that. Yeah, right?
I women who have not slept for decades.
Not okay. Terrible. It's not okay. And no, if you layer on top of that, the autism mom whose sleep has been deprived for years, because the child with autism doesn't sleep, because that's a huge issue in autism as well through the night. So what's happening hormonally, and what can she do about it?
So when we go through perimenopause, that's one of the early perimenopause symptoms is disrupted sleep. And that may be you waking up at 2 a.m. and you don't know why, and you just can't fall asleep, or you have trouble falling asleep, or you wake up too early at 4 and 5 in the morning and you can't get back to sleep. So there are many, I guess, types of disrupted sleep. And so we often blame progesterone for this. It could be many reasons, but progesterone, if you want to ask hormonally what's happening, if it's the hormones, then it is usually because of a drop in progesterone. And you may notice in those early phases, like I sleep terrible for a week or two, but then it comes back and my sleep's good. And that's, again, your progesterone probably fluctuating up and down with the estrogen. So until it eventually, you go every single night for months on end, you're like, okay, now it's not like getting better at all. And that's very often due to progesterone. So if it's a progesterone deficiency, then a little progesterone cream is so easy. And if that doesn't work, then oral progesterone, it's not like the oral estrogen, the oral progesterone, bioidentical, is a really great solution, works for a lot of women as well. Now, the woman, I keep thinking about the woman who said, oh, I have a history of breast cancer, or my mother had breast cancer, and or I'm 60, 10 years post-menopause, and I heard I'm too old for hormones.
Yeah.
Not necessarily true. And you need to find the specialist, because based on your age is not a good enough indicator. Now, there may be other things going on that maybe you're not a candidate for hormones, and hormones are not for everybody either. As pro hormones as you and I are, I think there's some women who probably they're better off not. And there are women who, I was thinking of one woman I know right now is just driving her crazy. Like, I can't get it right. And I read this and I read that it's bad. And then I read another thing that is bad. And I said, you know what? It's too much for you. I think probably not a good thing. As much as she's just completely confused. So just take a break. It's not for you right now. So there's different types of people. And there's people who intuitively just say, I just don't feel like it's right for me. Don't do it. Like, your intuition. I always believe your intuition is really, really good. And I also say that you can't out hormone a bad diet and lifestyle. And, you really need to focus as well on detoxifying these hormones. Like, if you're still drinking alcohol and you're not eating a good diet and you're not considering your liver and helping that detox, you probably shouldn't be on hormones. Like, it's just it's probably not a good thing. And I don't think the hormones will work really well if you have gut issues, if you have sleep issues, if you have all these other things. Now, not that you can't work with them in tandem. Give it a good shot, but I don't want women to say, oh, just take hormones because they sound like a miracle and they do all these amazing things, and then I just don't work on the rest of myself. But if you are one of these people who is struggling with sleep and you do find that progesterone helps, then you're more likely to focus on getting a little exercise, or you're able to focus better and be a better parent because your brain's working because you had a good night's sleep. Like, there's so many other reasons. It's not just the hormones, but it's the cycle that happens because you finally got a good night's sleep. If you have a poor night's sleep, you're more likely to have cravings for sugar. Your cravings for eating the foods that you know are not so good, because there's these hormones called leptin and ghrelin that regulate your appetite, and they don't work so well when you're sleep deprived. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, well, when you don't have a good night's sleep and it's terrible, you're not focused well, you can't think so well, it's hard to recall, you can't make decisions really well, your skin looks terrible, you look tired. It's all these things are again, we don't need research. You see it and you feel it. So prioritizing sleep is so important. I know it's so hard. It's hard enough for anyone, but when you got to worry about another kid in the house, it's doubly hard. So you got to find a way that works for you and to keep the harmony in the house. So it's going to be harder for you, but it's worth doing to prioritize that sleep.
It will be harder, but it's feasible. Again, you guys, like, the solution is not to just say, I'll sleep when I'm dead or I'll power through it. It's not. There's again another vicious cycle, and no sleep will cause so many other issues, which will again cause even worse sleep. So you can't just say, I'm just a bad sleeper. There are solutions, And so Zora, you were talking about progesterone and, doing, like, taking care of your hormonal side, because that has a huge impact on sleep. But there's also all kinds of supplements, including what you were just saying. That's great about the liver and detoxing, the old hormones or the dead hormones or the zombie cells, right? So when it comes to sleep, are there any supplements or any stacks that you swear by?
Oh, everyone has their stack, the things that work best for them. But I do want to talk about, before we add supplements, and make sure that you're doing all the other things, that you're not doom scrolling on your phone, that you do a little bit of breath work, that you do some of these things that are free, because the supplements, they can work. That's great. But oftentimes they don't work. They don't work as well if you don't have those simple practices in place that really make a difference in terms of keeping the lights low in the house when the sun goes down, or wearing these, blue blocking glasses if you must be on your devices, or if you can journal a little bit, if you can do a little stretch or yoga, or find a moment, even if it's 2 minutes 2 minutes is all you need to get started. And if you feel good, then you may find the time to extend that. But these are the things that are really, really important. Getting to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time all the time. Not eating heavy meals before bed. There's so many, keeping the room cool at night. These are simple things that should be done. And if those don't work, or if you want to use them in tandem with supplements, I have to say that for me, lately, it's magnesium that's working. And in particular, Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. They have this, what I'm into this recently, Natalie Nidham turned me onto this. I saw it in her story, and she's in the biohacking space, longevity, and she mixed there's a powdered form, and it has a little sweetness in it, and it's like stevia or something. And she mixes it with yogurt, and I put some blueberries in there and little walnuts, and I have it like somewhere within an hour before bed. And I am just knocked out and I sleep so good. But magnesium is nothing new. Like all different kinds of magnesiums can work for you. Some of them actually make you alert, some don't. Like make sure you find a formula that works for you. But magnesium's kind of a low hanging fruit. We probably need it anyways. Most of the functional medicine doctors I talk to, when they test their patients, everyone seems to be low on magnesium. You can test. You can see if you're not low on magnesium because you get enough from your diet. Fine. But for sleep, magnesium. But there was a time I had a stack that was working really well for me. And I can go back to, but I always forget, is the magnesium, spermidine, and turmeric. And glycine. Sorry, and glycine. Yeah. So it was magnesium, spermidine, and glycine. And then if I felt little joint pain or something, I would add in the turmeric. But it was those three that seemed to do a really good job. And there's another thing that really knocks me out, and it's something called 5-HTP. But if you have if you're on SSRIs, or if you have, you probably should be doing this. But I found a formula that has that plus some GABA, I think from L-theanine by Troscriptions. And it's a little troche. You can swallow it too. You don't have to put it in the middle of the mouth. And it has a little of 5-HTP in it. And every time I take that just puts me out as well. It's so effective. So there's so many different sleep formulas out there, but those are the ones that seem to work for me, as well as the women in my community as I've been hearing about lately.
Yeah. No, I love that. And again, we'll put that in the show notes because these are really, really good.
What works for you? I want to hear your stack. Your stack.
My stack. Oh, yeah. I definitely do. I mean, hi, nice to meet you. I do everything. So I do glycine, spermidine, magnesium glycinate, of course, every night. But I also take inositol and extra GABA also before I go to sleep. And I'm a reversed cortisol person. So I have really high cortisol at night. I'm a night owl. So really high cortisol at night, really low in the morning. So at night I have to take a lot of things to knock me out. So I also take some lavender that I have in capsules. So that's been really, really good, and melatonin. So
I'm wondering because, melatonin is another great one. Do you know about, what's the one? Herbatonin, the herbal melatonin.
I have it. Yeah, I take it. I love herbatonin. Yeah.
I remember when the herbatonin is really cool. I ran out. I should probably get some more, but I like that concept too. The question I have for you and anyone who's listening is, I remember when I had small kids, and so you're always on high alert. Now you guys are on high alert for the rest of your life. And I remember when the kids went to bed, it was my time. I was like, that's it. My cortisol is going to go up because I'm going to start doing my research. I'm going to write. I was building a little online business, and I just was so productive. And it was because the kids were asleep, and it felt like it was my time. Does that happen now with your community?
So I used to do that. And a lot of the moms that I know used to do that. But that's how you end up with that vicious cycle where, yes, at night you have more time, you're more available. And that's when you can do your research. Your brain is working really well. Everybody's sleeping. The problem is that during the day, you're dragging all day, but you still have to do all the things that you have to do. My solution has been like so counterintuitive, but it really works because I have low cortisol in the morning. But if I wake up at 5:30, and I force myself to get up and kind of short circuit that whole low cortisol thing, then I have more energy during the day, but I do have that like hour and a half first thing in the morning where I can either exercise or do a lot of my deep research during that time.
That's
So
in the
that's what.
morning.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
how many hours of sleep do you see the women in your community getting on average?
Very little. So honestly, all the women that I talk to, most of them are on like 4 hours of sleep. And a lot of them, because, they're trying to be brave warrior moms, they say, oh, it's fine. It's plenty. I feel really great. I've done this for years and I'm totally okay with it. And I'm like, well, you're running on cortisol. Like literally you're running on cortisol, caffeine and willpower. And that's why you're feeling like this, but it always catches up with them and they age very quickly. And then they start seeing a lot of the symptoms. So 4 hours, maybe for some people, but it's very rare. I don't think 4 or 5 hours is enough for anyone at all.
No, if you talk to the sleep experts, it's a very small percentage of people who are biologically night owls. So it's something, even if you think you're a night owl, you're probably not. But I sometimes I wanted to tease out if perhaps it's that, okay, I can finally like relax and do things myself. So you want to stay up late because it's the only time, but it could be reversed. Maybe there's some women out there who go to bed early. They wake up earlier and then they can be more productive in the morning as well. But yeah. So,
right?
At 5:30, is there sunlight outside?
Not always. Yeah. So I can just go out and get sunlight in my eyes. No, not every time. It's just literally, and maybe that's just my biology, but the 5:30 wake up, I have so much more energy during the day. And then it's easier to fall asleep at night because with the high cortisol, it's usually hard to fall asleep. And by the way, if I sit down and decide to do research and engage my brain, it makes it even harder to fall asleep. Actually, my husband is not allowed to talk to me after 9 p.m. He has a cutoff, 9 p.m. He tried 9:02, 9:05, and I tell him not even light conversations because then my brain engages and then I cannot go to sleep at all. So yes, practically it's perfect. It's a perfect time to do a lot of research and do brain work. But biologically, it just really messed me up when I was doing it. So that's why I think waking up first thing in the morning versus staying up at night is much, much better. And by the way, progesterone also is really good for me to fall asleep. I always take, I do transdermal, of course, again, that's me. I do transdermal and oral progesterone at night before I go to sleep. And I have it in 100 milligrams.
I've just been testing out actually another thing that works out lately. I've just started is progesterone oil that's got melatonin in it. And then I rub it in and that's pretty cool too.
Oh, that sounds really good. Okay. I want to try that. Definitely.
That was Karen Motel. Yeah. That's a brilliant idea.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. She has those on her website. Yeah. I think Nat's tried it and she likes it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many options. There's things that we can try all the time, but make sure you get the foundation to the basic sleep hacks first, or at least in conjunction, and you'll see those supplements will work like magic once you have all of that in place too.
And by the way, just accept that you would want to feel better. It's okay. You should always think, I want to feel better. How can I feel better? How can I be stronger? And that brings us to something where you're absolutely amazing, and that's muscle and bone. But you talk about, muscle being metabolic spanks. I love that. And women can lose up to 10% of their muscle mass during perimenopause alone. 10%, that's a lot. So for the caregiver who thinks I'm too tired to lift weights, so why do you think this is actually the most important thing that they should be doing, the weightlifting?
Yeah, it's another, your longevity organ is your muscle.
Yeah.
And muscle and bone often go together, like sleep and stress often go together. Muscle and bone are best friends. And so if you want to live an independent life, I mean, as a gerontologist, we know sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss, happens and you lose your independence. Most older adults want to be independent. If you are a caregiver, you have to be able to care physically even for that person. You may need to lift them or you need to bring things. And this is important. If you fall, you don't want to have a fracture and then get stuck in a hospital and can't take care of your family. So really, it's important to focus on muscle. And it's not aesthetics. Aesthetics are a nice byproduct, but it's not about that. It's about being independent, being able to do the things that you need to do. Muscle helps the metabolism. You become more metabolically flexible. When you have more muscle, the metabolism runs faster. So if you're struggling with weight, if you're struggling with cellulite, if you're struggling with anything, the fatigue, your muscle needs mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cells. They're abundant in muscle. And so you by focusing on muscle, and I say whatever it is to build the muscle, you do it. There's many ways to do it. And we generally like strength training because it's the fastest way to build this. And you feel stronger, you feel more empowered, and you're able to do more things. Exercise in general increases BDNF, which is that brain-derived neurotropic factor in the brain, which is related to Alzheimer's. If you lose it, then you're more at an increased risk of Alzheimer's. So you don't have the option to get Alzheimer's. Like you can't do that. So you need to do everything you can for all the organs in your body. But muscle is not an aesthetic thing. It is for your independence. It's to help your family. And so finding the time to do that is really important. And if you're struggling with the weight, you need to feed your muscles. You get to eat more. Like how fun is that? When you got to feed these muscles, they're very expensive. And if you don't use them and you don't feed them, they go away because your body's like, well, I'm going to go do something else rather than focus on building muscle. But you need to focus on it. And it doesn't mean you eat garbage. You have to eat enough protein. You have to eat all the nutrients and all the minerals in order to make these muscles grow. They can't grow if you don't feed them. So enjoy building your muscle. It doesn't, and you don't have to spend hours in the gym doing this. Just having a little bit of time, you could do it at home. You could just do a wall sit and you can build the muscles on your thighs. You can just do some little squats while you're brushing your teeth. You don't, again, need an hour in the gym. You can do these simple things even while your children are watching TV or doing some kind of activity. And you take the time to work on your core, do some push-ups. And again, you don't have to, if you can only do one, that's fine. You start somewhere, but please start because your 80-year-old self will certainly thank you when you take care of your body today.
No, absolutely. I think that's great. That's amazing advice. And talking about aesthetics, a lot of women, think about nutrition in terms of sometimes fasting, because that's been, a very sexy word, and dieting. But you say that these are two of the biggest mistakes, the fasting and dieting. And I know it's going to shock a lot of people, but can you explain to our audience why these are two big mistakes?
Well, the research on fasting is quite impressive. It's done and on mice, it's shown to increase their lifespan. And there's anywhere between 30%. I even heard 100% from Dr. David Sinclair today. So it's a pretty powerful tool. But what happens is in midlife, we tend to overdo it. I think there's a sweet spot to fasting, and it can bring loads of benefits. A lot of the research is done on guys, and they don't have a cycle and they don't have the hormones that we have. And so we don't seem to be benefiting exactly the same way as they are. However, having a 12-hour fast is quite normal. And evidently from Dr. Sachin Panda, who researches some of these fasting and sleep cycles and all these things. And he finds that most Americans are not reaching that 12-hour window, which means that if you finish eating dinner at 8, you eat breakfast at 8. Okay. So that's fasting, but it's not the kind of, that doesn't seem to have a problem with the women in our community. And as we're going through menopause, what we're seeing is some of us are overdoing the fasting. We're going 18 hours, 24 hours, 16 hours, or doing 24-hour fast every other day or eating one meal a day. And again, you do hear these fasting researchers and caloric restriction researchers showing the benefits. And it's true, it can bring these benefits, but I'm just seeing it backfire with the girls in our community. And there's always a trade-off. And so fasting, I think, is good up until a certain point, and it has to be done a certain way. Therapeutic fasting, that's another whole other ball game. If you have cancer or something, like that's different than the fasting that we're doing day to day. And so if you're trying to build muscle and you're exercising like crazy and you're not feeding the muscle, your body gets in a catabolic state, meaning it starts to break down your other parts of your body in order to try to just keep up. And so that's when we also tend to hold on to more fat because we're not eating enough. We're low calorie, a little bit too low calorie. And then we don't understand why we're fat. We're hardly eating anything. We're exercising like crazy, and we just get bigger and bigger and bigger and accumulating more fat. So this is where it can backfire. And then and the body is under stress, fasting is a stress, exercise is a stress. Yeah. And the game is to get it in the right dosage. Okay. This is hormesis. Hormesis is what doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, right? It's important that we learn what works for us, what doesn't, what are our limitations, what's the trade-off. So I believe that's why I love the biohacking community, is because we can test, measure, and assess, and we see what works for us or not. What works for me may not work for you, Nadia, or whoever's listening. It is your own self-experimentation. So I would say if you're the kind of woman who's struggling to lose weight, you are eating one meal a day, even if you're exercising or not exercising, you're probably not getting enough calories, and you're probably going to have to eat more. And I know it sounds horrifying and shocking, but you have enough stress in your life as it is with all the things that you need to do. Fasting and eating one meal a day is adding another stress to the body, and it's just not the time to do it. So try to find slowly, if it's hard for you to bring food back in or certain foods, like just do it slowly, little by little, see how you feel. If you're extremely tired, you're probably not getting enough energy from your food, and see if it does. And now you can play around with timing. You can play around with a 12-hour fast. If you want to play around 14-hour, I mean, it depends. Everybody's getting different. See what works for you. But managing the blood sugar is another component here, because it depends what you eat. And I like to eat. I like food. So I want to eat a lot. And I do eat quite a lot of food. Now, I'm very selective about the food because I know what works for my body and what doesn't work so well for me. And depending on your goals, then you may want to be selective. And again, some people need more carbohydrates, some people need less, some people need more protein, some people need less. And again, it's so individual, but I encourage you to, if you are that person eating one or two meals a day, experiment a little bit with adding a little bit more food, and then walking, managing that blood sugar as well after your meals. It doesn't have to be a long walk, 5 minutes, try it, just get started. And that's already going to help with regulating a little bit the blood sugar, so you don't store more fat. There's, again, so many rabbit holes you can go down, but eating whole foods, eating real foods, eating less processed foods is kind of key. I like Michael Pollan. Did you ever read his book? I can't remember the name of the book. It's all about food and nutritionism. And he had such a simple quote. And he says, eat real food, not too much, and mostly plants. Okay. And I agree with that 100%. The only thing is I also add in, and not too little.
Oh, and not too little. Okay. I thought you were going to say protein. Yeah, that's true. Not too little. Well, especially like you were saying, if your body's already under so much stress, right? And if you're fasting and dieting, that's another huge additional layer of stress. And again, the goal, you know that all this stuff works because you're going to feel amazing. So if you don't feel amazing, it's not working. And so you made a powerful point in your bone health series about how you can't outrun chronic stress. So autism caregiving, right, is one of the most sustained sources of cortisol elevation there is. And you were talking about this at the beginning because it just does not end. And so what is that doing, that stress, to a woman's body over 10, 15, 20 years? And so what are some of the simplest ways to start bringing cortisol down, on top of not adding additional cortisol by extreme fasting.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that it's okay to have stress. It's okay to have cortisol. There's, we don't want to demonize these things. We want them in the right dosages, right? If we didn't have any stress, then we're just kind of a lump of a piece of meat, like have no purpose in life and nothing to do. And we need, if we have deadlines, for example, that motivates us to get the project done. So it's okay. And the same thing with cortisol. We want to have cortisol in the morning. It's an amazing stress hormone that can help us stay alert and keep us motivated, get things going, but we want them to be at the right time. And we don't want chronic cortisol or chronic stress. Now, you guys have chronic stress. That's just, it is what it is. You can't run away from it. And we've had this discussion actually with my professor, Dr. Paul Nash, in our community, where he said this is where we need to change the perception as well as find respite. And respite meaning somebody who can take your place, even if it's just for a few moments, even if it's just for a few minutes, do whatever you can so that you can take care of yourself, whatever that may be. It could be cooking a good meal. It could be doing a couple of push-ups. It could be just taking a nap for 5 minutes, something, because the respite is where you're able to recharge and recover. And he said, honestly, you don't need that much time, because sometimes we think, oh, I need like 30 minutes at least, or I need an hour. No, start where you can, even if it's 1 minute of breathing. So breath work is one of the things I love to talk about most when it comes to cortisol, because it's free. And we just need to harness the power of our breath. And you can go to so many YouTube videos out there. You can control your breath quite easily, especially unless you're really in a panic state. If you have an anxiety attack, it's hard. But it's something I wonder you could probably teach your kids if they do have anxiety or panic attacks, to try to teach them how, and you don't teach them when they're in the middle of the situation, right? You teach them when they're in a more relaxed state. And it's just learning how to stay calm through the breath, because when you control the breath, and it means more like taking just gentle inhales in and gentle exhale out, a little bit of a longer exhale. And we don't need to take deep inhale breaths and blow it all out. I mean, if that makes you feel good, fine. But what we're saying is that when you're able to relax the breath or control it in a way, then you can lower your blood pressure, lower your heart rate, increase your heart rate variability, which is your resilience. You want to have good resilience, how you're managing the stress. And you feel calm immediately. It's within seconds. And we do this in our community, where we just practice, 15 minutes, not even, I do 5-minute blocks, and immediately you're in a completely different zone, and your brain works better. Your thinking, your decision making, and it doesn't take long. So I really encourage people who are listening now to just Google it, or just follow one simple video on how to breathe for anxiety, for stress, for sleep, for whatever it is you need. You can even have coffee breath, and that means you get excited. You can increase your energy naturally without coffee or caffeine. And you can do that through the breath. It's such a powerful tool that I think if you learn it yourself, it's good for you. But also, once you learn it, teach it to your kids, because it may be just a lifesaver. Brings down the cortisol. Like if you measure this, your cortisol is definitely coming down. And that's the game, is to try to get cortisol high when you need it high, and get it low when you need it low. And all the ways you can do that is to find an activity that you like, that makes you feel good, safe, and calm. Maybe it's a walk in nature. Maybe it's just getting outdoors, walking around the block. Maybe it's spending time with a pet and stroking it and getting some oxytocin, which is that bonding hormone, but it also makes you feel calm. Getting a tea, taking a bath. There's 1,000,001 ways to lower cortisol, but you do need to take some time to do it. And it can be as simple as just 1 minute, but it's worth it. And then maybe build on it and the things that actually are attracting you most to lower that cortisol.
Yeah.
But don't do extreme things like fasting, doing too much fasting or doing too much exercise and all these other things. They increase your cortisol. We, try to manage that. And I think the perception of stress, I'll give you the link to that TED Talk by Kelly McGonigan, because it really changes if you can understand that it's the perception of stress, and you can shift the thoughts in your head to lower the cortisol. And that's having that perspective could be a game changer.
Yeah. I love that, because it's, taking back control of your nervous system. And note for myself, I do have your breath work on my calendar. I just need to make it every time. It just feels like a luxury. But again, it's not, right? So definitely I will be there at the next
all the replays are there.
With you.
It's good to be live, but I have all the recordings to replay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So just got to do it. But of course, what I get super excited about, that's my geeky side is, let's talk about this. Some of the tools in your biohacking kit, you've experimented a lot. So if you had to pick your top 3 biohacking tools that give you the most return for the least money, or maybe even the ones that end up costing a lot, but you think are amazing in complexity. So what are they? I'm thinking about the Caregiver. Maybe some caregivers have limited budgets, some have limited time, and some don't, and are looking at all of these, all of these gadgets. Would you love if you had 3 that you could recommend?
I would say some of the things we already talked about, the breath work, number 1. Yeah. Like, it's such a powerful tool and it's free. Number 2, I would say go outdoors, get some sunlight in your eyeballs, go see a sunrise. You will see how your mood changes for the rest of the day, how you sleep at night, because there are all these little clocks in your body called circadian clocks, and they manage, depending on when you see sunlight, they get a signal to the body to start producing certain hormones to make sure that you are in the right place at the right time. If you're indoors all day long, you're not getting these signals that are really powerful. And sitting next to a window, it's better than not sitting next to a window, but it's more powerful to get outside. And when you're outside, you get and see a sunrise or a sunset, you get this light. There's many spectrums of light, but there's this very powerful red light. And that helps again with all these hormone production as well. So it's again a free thing. But if you live in the north or you can't get outside, then I do like to have a red light therapy device of some kind. And that's these little bulbs that mimic a sunrise or a sunset. And you can get a lot of great benefits as well with those devices. And there's so many on the market. And it's just a matter of finding what is in your budget, what works for you. They're usually not cheap, but you can find things that are reasonable. So those are my I would say my top 3 is this. Again, I like the free stuff, and I'm trying to think, because we're with the caregiver in mind. It's really about taking care of yourself. And the other thing I would say is the exercise. So if you can hit some of these things all together, you can go outdoors when the sun rises or the sun sets, you go for a walk, you can do some little exercises like little jumps or push-ups or whatever. Even if you did a couple of them, that's fine. And you're getting the red light. So, and you can breathe, you can practice some breath work while you're walking. There's many different types and techniques, but all of this has to do, it's free. It's free. And it's and those are the ones that are most powerful. We have these devices and things because not all the time we can, do these things. But if you can, even if it's just a couple times a week, it's going to be life-changing. It's just, I know it's hard, but do it. You don't have an option.
It's feasible. It's definitely very feasible. We're not talking hours. We're just talking, a few minutes. So I think it's definitely feasible. So we've covered a lot of ground today. So let's bring it home. And if an autism mom or grandmother is listening right now and she realizes she's been running on empty for years, what are the first 3 things she should do this week? And it could be what we just talked about, but what can she do this week? Not someday, this week.
I think one thing we didn't mention that I think is really important is find respite. Find someone to fill your shoes for a moment, even if it's for a few minutes. And if you can, longer, great. But start somewhere. And you'll see by building these relationships, and one of the most powerful tools for longevity is community. And that community is so important. What you're doing, Nadia, is so important, is building this online community or listening audio community. But being in person is also super powerful. And knowing that you're not alone, your body feels safe, you've got some support. And if you don't, go find it. Go find someone, a friend and a partner. And this is going to help you not only manage your life, but also later on. I know that you're thinking, what's going to happen to my child when I die? Like what's going to happen? And you feel responsible. It's a huge weight on you. So having a community, a supportive community, I think is probably more powerful than the breath work. Like I love the breath work. That's kind of for today, but I would still focus on nurturing your network. And I know it's hard, Nadia, you told me yourself how difficult it is to get out in public sometimes with your kids, and people don't understand what's going on. And you may even have family members who are distancing themselves from you because they don't understand. And it's probably hard to make friends. People maybe don't want to learn about autism or just don't have the patience for it. But there are people who do. And it's finding those golden nuggets, and you will not find them if you sit at home all day. And that's where you have to be a little social, get out there and find those people who are going to support you. I think that's going to be one of the biggest levers right now. And what can you do today? Those are three things you want to do today?
So the three things would be find your community, right? Definitely find your community and some respite. And we probably spoke about going.
And I would say choose something that we talked about today, if you can, or something else that is just for you. Just for you. Because if you don't function well, if you can't sleep, if you don't show up every single day for this person or these people, nothing's going to work, and life is going to be miserable. And when life's miserable and you're depressed and upset, you got a shorter lifespan and you have a shorter health span, and you don't have time for that. So I think if you could choose something that's really just for you, and like you said so many times, it's not a luxury. This is self-care. You put on your own oxygen mask, like that analogy in the airplane, before you put it on your child. And there's a reason people say that, and because you cannot take care of that person if you're falling apart or if you pass out. You need to take care of yourself, and please don't consider it a luxury or I don't have time. You have to make the time, because this is one of the most important things you can do for your child.
You should feel amazing. It's okay. You should want to feel amazing.
And you can.
It's your right. And talk about loneliness. I'm very lucky to have found you and your community. It's amazing. I know it's not in person, but frankly, it feels like it's in person. So if our listeners want to hear you, want to join your community, follow you, where can they find you, follow you, and join the community? And we'll put that in the show notes, but if you could tell them.
Oh, great. Thank you. hackmyage.com is my website, and you'll find everything from social media to the community. It'll just called Biohacking Menopause, and there's a little button there, and you'll see that you can find all the information about the community. And we would love to have you there. We're still a small community, so we get to know each other pretty well and spend time together. And when I have guest experts coming on, their time is for you. Like it's really, really quite nice to have that community. So please join us, and you're not alone. And we have so many solutions. We can dive deeper into all these things and just come up with something a little more personal for you, depending on you and your situation. So come and join us, and I'll give you the link to put in the show notes.
Thank you, Zora. That sounds amazing. And thank you so much for this conversation. I've learned so much from you and in your community. And I'm so glad our autism families, get to meet you today. And for everyone listening, all of Zora's links, also the supplements and all the things she mentioned, the tools, everything will be in the show notes. And if this episode hit home, please share it with another autism mom or caregiver in your life who needs to hear it. And we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.